Aloha and welcome. I was thinking of I better get going on a little reaction video to the bearded rugby man, aka Kennedy Hall, because he said some pretty cool things about recovering Catholic uh, going on, and that's nuts. But then he kind of went on about NFP, and I thought I want to rebut what he says, and also just give a real nailed down explanation and proof of why NFP is illicit and it can never be otherwise. So we'll try to be brief, but let's just listen to what Kennedy says. I want to first say this recovering Catholic stuff. I met this lady, Laura Vandervoss, on YouTube talking about NFP. I'm like, she sounds liberal. I got to do a video on her. So I did. Next thing I know, she's front page news because she's doing this recovering tradition, traditional, whatever the heck, recovering from tradition thing. It's like recovering Catholic deal. And it essentially and Kennedy did a great job on it. He says he made a lot of great arguments, but essentially it's, if you don't like the cross, come to us. We'll give you a kinder and gentler version of Catholicism. And it's wrong and it's modernist and it's not going to go anywhere. But that's why it is tempting, because everyone wants an easier cross if they can justify it intellectually. And that's all it is. So let's listen to what Kennedy here says, because the problem is Kennedy Hall effectively is the same as Laura Vandervoss, the Miss Happy Catholic, about NFP. He's just a little bit different on the spectrum, but you can't have a little bit of abortion. It's always wrong. Obviously, there's a spectrum of what people think about abortion, but it's intrinsically evil. So that's the only thing a Catholic can think. And it's the same for procreation primary. A Catholic cannot think otherwise, which means you can't ever try to avoid pregnancy while using the conjugal act. That's all it means. So I got some stuff to go through. Hopefully we can stick around for that. Oh, and then any questions you have, I'm going to answer them. That's the difference between me and I think everyone else on YouTube. I answer every question, even if it's 477 of them. I'll do it. And so you hit me with your best shot. Let's listen. Let's get Kennedy here up on the screen. See what he says about NFP. Ready? Roll it.
And they'll say, oh, the trads, they didn't like NFP. Actually, no, at least in the Society of St. Pius X, there's no problem with natural family planning as far as it's a thing that people can do.
Yeah. NFP is a thing people can do, but not licitly. Hold on, let's keep going.
But it's just historically, the most recent teaching really on it is probably from Pius XII in any authoritative sense. It's about...
The most recent teaching on NFP is from Pius XII. In any what did he say? In any authoritative sense. How can you say that? If Pius XII gave teaching on NFP, then what about all popes after that? Why should we not let them give quote teaching? So the truth is that because procreation is primary, no pope can change that. So any pope who says a little NFP can be okay doesn't have authority to say that, because you can't change nature. So here we go. Let's see.
Regulation and spacing of births, not about not having children when you don't want to for reasons that aren't grave.
I've said this before. The reasons are irrelevant if something is not procreation primary.
So some people will say NFP is a contraceptive mentality. I actually disagree with that. I think NFP can be used sinfully, but I don't think you can call it contraceptive because it isn't contraception.
Okay. He just said a tautology. You don't think you can call NFP contraception because it isn't contraception. And I'll keep going. That's all he says. It is, and like abortion, you can abort a mission, you can abort a lot of things, but we typically associate it with what happens when you kill your baby. Contraception is anything which is against conception. It doesn't have to be what you think contraception is. It's what's against conception, and that would be any family planning where you're trying not to get pregnant. Doesn't matter what it is. Hang on.
And you do have to demonstrate a lot of self-control.
Okay,
even
whatever.
if you're using it wrongly. So I don't think contraception is the right critique.
He doesn't think it, but it just is. Okay, here we go.
The critique is, you know, um, the husband and the wife want to make a lot more money. And so they decide they don't want to have kids for 5 years. They're going to use NFP. The problem there is you can't serve two masters. You can't serve mana and you can't serve God. You can't serve money and you can't serve God.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to have its own spiritual problems. They didn't contracept, but they used something wrongly.
They didn't contracept, but they used something wrongly. What was the thing that they used? And what the something? Okay, what they did was they used the conjugal act wrongly to not have kids. This goes to a fundamental question, which is why Kennedy Hall and all the other NFPers are on the same page as Miss Recovering from Tradition, Laura Vandervoss. They all have one thing in common. That is, increase and multiply is a duty, which is a Protestant error. Increase and multiply is nature. It's not a duty. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. If it's a duty, then there can be exceptions. And if you have a, a serious cause, any cause, a nice reason, a bad reason, a just reason, or whatever reason, it's all your spectrum of what you want to have picked out for yourself. So no one can say what's what. Here, let's see what he says.
For their own personal gain. I guarantee you, when you look through these stories and you were to ask these people about their experiences, not in all of them, but I bet you in many of them, you're going to find that they themselves were attached to their sin.
Yeah, all right. Then he just goes on. So he just said a quick blurb about NFP, but that was the main point that he made uh, was that it's just a matter of how serious your reason is, and if that isn't nailed down, it's a moving target, and any pope can move it around, and that's what they're doing. And it just, since love wins, there's no boundaries on it anymore. All right, now let's get rid of Kennedy Hall here for a minute. We're going to share a different screen. Let me see if I can do that. Share this screen in 10. Okay, here we go. Let's open it up so you can see it better. Okay, now I'm going to have to make this a little bit bigger. Pardon me. Now we're going to get into the nitty gritty of why this is just one of the main reasons he is listed sin, and I'm going to prove it to you. Here we go. Let's start with Casti Canubi 59, and we'll go from there. Okay. Holy Church knows well that not infrequently one of the parties is sinned against rather than. For when grave cause, he or she reluctantly allows the perversion of the right. What that means is that if somebody is not keeping procreation primary, they're perverting order. So the marriage contract is right over the body for acts suitable for the generation of children. If you don't give that, you're sinning. It's called the marital debt, which is out nowadays because love wins, etc. Which and heard what Pope Francis said. I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so in such case, there is no sin, provided that, mindful of the law of charity, husband or wife, he or she, does not neglect to seek to dissuade and deter the partner from sin, the other spouse. So all that means is if someone is messing up the procreation primary part, it's not a sin. Excuse me. Then for you to participate isn't necessarily a sin, but you do need to tell them what they're doing is a sin. So if he or she is perverting the right order, that is a sin. Okay. That's right there, black and white. NFP is a sin because it's a perversion of the right order. But you're saying, wait, John, no. They're talking about artificial contraception. No, they're not. They're talking about that which begins naturally and ends unnaturally. So his sin that she can reluctantly allow, there it is, that he or she can reluctantly allow. His sin is onanism. That's what she can reluctantly allow. But her sin that he can reluctantly is NFP. It's just he Okay, I don't know what happened on that one. I think the power got weird. Onward. So back to Casti. I'm going to show you why Casti Connubii cannot refer to contraception. So the reason why it's contraception is not allowed, we're going to go to what the Sacred Penitentiary said and the Vademecum for confessors and good stuff like that. Now, here's what, oh, shoot, just a minute. I'm going to push pause. So where we're at is, can the perversion of the right order, as in not making procreation primary, can it be tolerated? And some will say, well, that they're referring to, they're referring to contraception. So the Sacred Penitentiary, who rules on this stuff back in 1916, said, is a woman held to positive resistance in the case to which practice onanism and the husband wishes to use an instrument? In other words, if he's using artificial contraception, does she have to resist? And they say yes. Must the woman oppose that resistance? The woman must oppose that resistance, the same as that which a virgin puts up to an attacker. Affirmative. So that goes back to what we just said in Casti Connubii. His perversion of the right order is onanism. But what is her perversion of the right order, which is a sin? It's not contraception, because he cannot reluctantly allow that which is intrinsically evil, and that must be have positive resistance, just like a virgin would put up to an attacker. So you cannot ever tolerate it. You can ever allow artificial contraception, but you can allow the perversion of the right order. It's still a sin, but you have to tell him it's not. So what are we getting at here? So we figured out, yes, his sin that's onanism, but her sin is female onanism, aka NFP. Now, let's go down to the Vademecum for Confessors, 1997. So you're getting into this. This is all on the Vatican website. That's where I get this. Now, they're saying, let's read it real quick. Special difficulties are presented by cases of cooperation in the sin of a spouse who voluntarily renders the unitive act infecund. The unitive act, that's Vatican II speak for the conjugal act, but the new de facto primary purpose is, quote, unity, which is some sort of it's undefined. This is why you can get an annulment, because marriage is undefined. So this unitive act is just the conjugal act. So it's a sin if you voluntarily render the conjugal act infecund. That would be contraception, but it's also NFP, because they're both doing the same thing. They're methods so that you can have the conjugal act without a baby. That's all that is. It's like plain as the nose on your face, but the Catholics don't want to see it. They squint really hard so they can't see this. So, and this little Vademecum for confessors here gets a little bit sneaky, but I'm going to show you in the footnotes what they're talking about. That people don't want to go there. Okay. In the first place, it is necessary to distinguish cooperation in the proper sense from violence for unjust, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Okay. So, can you cooperate with a spouse who's using contraception? We just found out that the answer is no. P.S. This thing is footnoted number 47, which in 47 is however the heck you say that word. This right here is the footnote 47, which is right back to where we started from, which is the Sacred Penitentiary in 1916 and all their decisions. That is the footnote where they get this information, okay? So the church is saying, effectively, NFP is sin, but wink, wink, we're not really going to go there. Okay. This cooperation with can be licit when the three following conditions are jointly met. So you can cooperate with someone who's perverting the right order, who is rendering the conjugal act infecund. That sounds like NFP to me. When the action of the cooperating spouse is not already illicit in itself. Okay, What the heck does that mean? I'll tell you. And then it goes to 47. When the action of the cooperating spouse is not already illicit, if you go to what the sacred penitentiary says, which is all up above in this document, which I'm going to share with you, that which is not already illicit can be cooperated with, that which is natural in its inception. So it starts natural and ends unnatural, like onanism. Onanism begins natural, ends unnatural. NFP begins natural, but ends unnatural because you never achieve the natural end for which the act is, because you're always, like I said, you're hiding the egg. Onan himself hid the seed. So that which is already illicit, all those, sodomy, any of that kind of crazy stuff, anything that's illicit in itself, uh, cannot cooperate it because it has to be not already illicit. Okay. And there has to be grave reasons. In other words, if it's, if speaking of grave reasons, that's if the spouse is gonna freak out or have a hard time or whatever, look, because you guys say this is a sin, we can't do this. But under serious circumstances, if your husband's not gonna cooperate or is a big problem or whatever, then you can allow it. That which is not already illicit. Let's see. Okay, number 3 doesn't matter. So, like I said, then there's the footnote 47, and all this goes back to the sacred penitentiary, which says, am I yelling? Sorry. Which says contraception can never be cooperated with if it's artificial, because it's a sin, and the woman must oppose with resistance put up to an attacker. So you have to have positive resistance. You can't ever cooperate. But earlier it says with onanism, she can remain passive. Dig it? Because it starts natural. That's what they're talking about. I hope that's clear, and I want you to ask me questions if it's not. And if you, hang on a second. Now I remember what I was going to tell you. So it's Father Tad at the National Catholic Bioethics Center. He's big on trying to sneak around this, but he's wrong, and he's like the top head cheese on this. And I've gone back and forth on email, and he eventually ran away. That guy will say that that you can use contraception as far as, by the way, this is why all Catholics contracept, because if it's not intrinsically evil, then there are reasons why you can. That's all this is saying. That's all the status quo is saying. Because they cannot say that NFP is a sin. If you say NFP is a sin, your life is over. Your name is mud. You have no job in the Catholic Church. Nothing. No Catholic can say NFP is sin and have any money if they're going, or have anything, any standing, anything, if they're going to do anything Catholic. So we have to say that the only sin this is speaking of is artificial contraception. But we can't do that because it footnotes from the Vademecum to confessors down to back to 1916, which says you can only remain passive for sins which are not already illicit, immediately illicit, like onanism or NFP. But you cannot remain passive for that which is already illicit, like sodomy or artificial contraception. Boom, case closed. NFP is a sin. Right there, Casti Canubi 59. Now let's keep going and see what else we got. All right. P.S. This is kind of the main thing I wanted to talk about. And this is, like I said earlier, this is what Laura Vandervoss, Miss Happy Catholic, oh, by the way, Kennedy Hall said something good in the end there. He said, these people are attached to their sin. Yeah, everyone is. Protestants are. Everyone wants their sin and to be able to be okay with God with it, right? So, increase and multiply. Let's talk about that for a second. Anyway, so the point is that though everybody who says NFP can be licit must admit the Protestant lie that increase and multiply is a duty because if it's a duty, there can be exceptions, just like you have a duty to go to mass in justice on Sunday, but there can be exceptions if there's grave reason. That's where we get the serious reason, grave reason, just reason, whatever. So there's, okay, if you're bleeding to death, you can't go to mass, or if I, just am not feeling right, you can't go to mass. So popes can say different things on that, and people can follow their conscience on that. Now it's the same thing with NFP, because there's a lie which snuck in, which says increase and multiply is a duty. Now let's check. Check this out. I was reading my Douay Rheims Bible and reading Genesis one day, and here what it says right here: increase and multiply. This is not a precept / duty, as some Protestant controversists would have it, but a blessing. That's correct. Rendering them fruitful. In other words, it's nature, it's not a precept. And the reason we say that, for God had said the same words to the fish and the birds and all crawling things and everything, who were incapable of receiving a precept. In other words, it's the state of nature. When you do the marriage act, babies happen naturally. If you do the marriage act and babies don't happen based on your managing it thereof, however means you do, that's not natural. Okay, so this is the key right here. And by the way, I did email Laura Vandervoss about this, and she won't get back to me on it. Now, check this out. This whole thing started about marriage as a duty. Where did all this crazy stuff come from? When did it start? It started with the Lambeth Anglicans in 1930. So let's look what they said about contraception and marriage and increase and multiply and all that cool stuff back in 1920, right here. Okay, yo. Conference laying down the rules. Okay. In opposition. Okay. So it's saying warning against unnatural means for the avoidance of conception. Okay. The only natural means for the avoidance of conception is to avoid the conjugal act. That's it. Okay. So they're saying, so now they're saying under the name of science and religion, encourages married people the deliberate cultivation of the sexual union as an end in itself. Sound familiar? That's Humanae Vitae. That's Christopher West. It's an end in itself. In other words, the primary purpose is love, okay? This union of love business. And I'll get to Pope Francis in a minute. So they're saying this is a bunch of baloney. And that's what the Catholics used to say also. And the reason they say that in 1920, the Anglicans, because the primary purpose for the continuation of the human race through the gift is the gift of children. Notice they didn't say the duty of children. The word duty ain't in here. It's the gift of children, nature, okay? That's the primary purpose, the primary natural purpose. By the way, people say marriage isn't just procreation, it's for the education of children, and that's also essential. So you have to have the right education, which means you have to have good vibes in the house, so you have to use NFP. There's only one natural purpose that's essential to marriage, and that's procreation. The education of children is not a natural purpose. It's a supernatural purpose. The two atheists or two non-baptized people do not have the obligation for the education of their children in the faith. They don't. So marriage is nature and it's procreation. The education of children is not part of the natural purpose of marriage. You can call it the supernatural purpose. Okay, it's in the sacrament. So yes, those in a natural marriage, it's valid. If they have no intention to educate their children, it's still because the marriage contract is the right over the body for acts, suitable for the generation of children, not the generation and education of children, just the generation. That's all you have to be capable of doing. Now then, 1930. Hopefully I'm not rambling too much, but we got to get it out. It's just kind of nerd stuff, but it's key if you want to get to the bottom of NFP. Okay? And the good thing is I'm going to have all this for you so you can look at it again and ask me a bunch of questions and you tell me where I'm wrong all right, here we go. 1930, love was in the air, baby, and I think who was it? Miss Procreation Secondary herself, the Catholic lady, Margaret Sanger. That's what she said. And there's all this major pressure to say it's, hey, doggy, take it easy, okay? All this major pressure to say we've got to. Would you easy on the fleas, girlfriend? Just lie to, hey, sit down, okay? It's okay. Just relax. Anyway, so 1930. Okay, here they go. The conference affirms the duty of parenthood. Uh-oh. It's not a duty, but for the first time in the history of Christianity, we have called parenthood a duty. Having kids is a duty. Susie Q, could you chill out on the fleas? Hey, hey, mellow. Just mellow. Shh. Lie down and relax. Okay. Anyway. Okay, let's see. So there they call it the duty. Then they go on to say, okay, so the primary and obvious method is complete abstinence. Yeah, that's the natural method. Okay. But they're saying this is like this stuff has been totally lifted and put into Humanae Vitae. Nevertheless, in those cases where there is such a clearly felt moral obligation to limit parenthood, which is what Casti Canubi 8 says you cannot do, and Humanae Vitae says you can do, and where there is morally sound reasoning for the avoiding of complete abstinence. That's exactly what NFP is, man. And this is Humanae Vitae just took it right from the Anglicans. The conference agrees that other methods may be used, provided this is done in light of the same Christian principles. And they said the same thing in Humanae Vitae. We're not violating our Christian principles. Blah blah blah. Okay, it's all that word duty. Once it's a duty, you can have exceptions. Therefore, what frickin' difference does it make what method you use, which is exactly what the Birth Control Commission in 1963 concluded. That's why we're going to have contraception if we keep up with the NFP. You cannot keep it out. And I wouldn't be surprised if not too long we get it from Pope Francis. The teaching on contraception has changed because marriage is love. Now then, so there it is right there. And I gave the link and they voted for it because the Anglicans could change it, and then the Catholics caved with this NFP thing because, and I'm going to get to that here. Now we got 1951. And this is where Kennedy Hall has joined the modernists by saying that Pius XII here has the most recent teaching. No, the teaching, faith and morals regarding the conjugal act is in stone, can never change. But the modernists say it can, and it did through right here in 1951. If you try to do the history of NFP, they're pretty light on telling you what it is, but most sources will go to this thing. Therefore, to embrace the matrimonial state, as in the Marriage Act, to use the Marriage Act and at the same time avoid its primary duty. There's that word again, duty. For the first time in the history of the Catholic Church, the word duty associated with making babies, you have to, to avoid your primary duty. Without it would be a sin against the very nature of marriage. The sin against the very nature, without it. So to use the conjugal act but not have kids would be a sin against nature. But if you have a grave reason, it's okay. Wrong. If their sentence is so goofed up, it doesn't make any sense. And that's why Pius the 10th, Pius the 10th earlier said no reason, however grave. Okay. So this is a giant 2 + 2 = 5 moment right there, which the Anglicans started poking a hole in the fence, and then the Catholics said, "Well, we can wiggle this through NFP." No, you can't, because marriage is not a duty. Excuse me. Increase and multiply is not a duty. You can't touch nature by saying, for grave reasons, you can use the matrimonial state and avoid the primary purpose. Like I said, but if it's a duty, you can. And it's not. Now, and Humanae Vitae knows this. They started off right from the get-go. The transmission of human life is a serious role, the fulfillment of this duty. So there they go. They start now. They say it's a duty. Um, it's not, because, as we said earlier, back up there, increase and multiply in Genesis. It's a blessing in its nature. And the fish, we're told that, in the birds and all that, they don't get duty. All right. We're all told the same thing: increase and multiply with the act. You don't use the act for something else. So let's see if is that the end of my notes. I think so. All right. So now we'll go to Pope Francis just for a second. Here, yeah. Same SS couples live the gift of love. That's the new basis of marriage, the personalist norm, the gift of love. Okay, children flow from love. That would be like Scott Hahn 101. It's completely wrong. Marriage is a contract for acts suitable for the generation of children. That's it. That's why you can't have homo marriage. But if it's the gift of love, it's the gift of self, it's the total gift of self, which has no legal definition, then anything goes, which is exactly what Pope Francis is doing, which is why a lot of people have to say yes to gay marriage, because it's love. So I think that would be a wrap. There's probably something else I can say. But anyway, I did like Kennedy Hall's video. Let me see. I did like his video. He said some good things. I think this trad recovery stuff is completely stupid, but it will scoop some people up who are like, yeah, it's hard being Catholic, and here's a way we can be like a nicey nice Catholic, and that's really cool. So I think that's all I wanted to mention. But like I said, I'm going to be waiting for you to ask me questions, and we're going to call it a night. Peace and love.